Welcome, everybody, to Dead Talk Live, and it is my special honor to welcome our guest, Natalie Brown, who has been, let's see, in The Strain, Saw 5, Clarice, one of your latest movies, Thunderbird, which I just saw today.
Oh, cool.
I just saw it today, and I have a lot of questions about Thunderbird.
I
So
I might be able to answer two of them.
now, it is a great movie, and to not ruin the ending for people who have not yet watched it, when you
Mhm.
got the script and you saw the ending, that it was not Native American folklore, but actually kind of realistic, did that throw you for a loop?
Um, I definitely had a lot of questions about the ending, and he's Nicholas Tretion, who wrote and directed the movie, had a very clear vision, and the writing was great. And he, said that he likes movies like Denis Villeneuve is one of his great inspirations, and Ridley Scott, and he said he likes movies that ask more questions but don't necessarily give you the answers. And I think for him, it can be whatever you want it to be, but it's a metaphor. So it definitely gives it a bit of a sci-fi feel,
Yeah,
more than just supernatural. But I think it's a metaphor.
me too. I agree. To me, I would put it under drama, a little bit of crime, and sci-fi. It's a
They
mixture
call
of
it a supernatural crime drama,
exactly, exactly.
officially. Yeah.
Now, your character is a mystery, okay? You just show up. When you initially showed up in the movie, I thought you might be FBI because you're obviously not a local. You were
Mhm.
called in. So, how did you build a background for a character where we were given very little in background information about? How did you do it to prepare for the role?
Well, he gives you, we know that she's recently reinstated. We know that she's made some mistakes in the past that had her suspended from the force. Um, and he gave me the backbone of the character, but really allowed me to flesh it out. And as much as Seymour's along for the ride in this story, like I feel like it's more Will's story. I'm there to live out my character, but I'm really I really wanted to inject the movie with a little more backstory. That was definitely my inclination too. And I found myself the only time we see Seymour in her space is in a motel room.
Yeah.
And she's come from like a bigger city. It's like, she's Vancouver PD that's come to a small town to, bring her expertise and some resource to the area that is perhaps ill equipped to deal with this very real issue. Um, and all we see is what's on her end table. And we see that she's got the clipping that, she'd not worked within the framework of, the rules of engagement. And it got her into trouble. And so, as much as she wants to play by the rules, I think that she knows that you need some unorthodox tactics to get some answers outside of a system that's very broken.
Exactly.
And I really wanted something more on my end table, whether it was like you know a niece or a girl or someone that even whether it was the last case I wasn't able to solve. And Nicholas was like, I don't want to spell it backstory. Like you can do what you want, but I don't necessarily want to you know, have it all laid out for the audience on the table. And I'm glad he fought me on it because from the very beginning he said, you'll not be wearing a leather jacket or a blazer over a tank top. This is not a TV detective. This is the Pacific Northwest. Yes, there's some inspiration from like shows that like The Killing that really have the Pacific Northwest as a backdrop. And, even now we've got Mayor of Easttown where, you've
Mm-hmm.
got someone who's not interested in her appearance and, she's not wearing hair and makeup done. She's really just about being doggedly determined to solve a crime. And he stuck to his guns, and I'm glad he did because the next day, after shooting that scene, I saw a Kroll show spoof of like Dead Girl Town and how, every TV detective show always has this, vendetta that every cop is, or someone that they're looking to, seek revenge. There's this vengeance for whether it's, the niece, the daughter, the girl whose case they didn't solve, the cold case they're still working on. And And it was a whole parody. And I don't know if you've seen the SNL Murder Dirter
Yes,
parody of Mayor of
yes, yes,
Easttown,
yes.
but he just really wanted to go against the grain and work against any sort of tropes in the story. And
He did
I'm
it.
glad. I'm
It
glad.
worked out. It worked out.
Yeah.
Now, Thunderbird is a independent film. You have
Yeah.
worked on major studio non-independent films and TV shows. What attracts does it is there like a special place in your heart for independent films?
Yes, I wanted to make a concerted effort to work more independent films as much as I love any opportunity to work with good people, good writing, great creators. But there's something I really love about independent film, and I would do like whatever shorts that were available. I'd work on them for free because there's something I love about the manifestation process of a writer or director, something that came from their brain and being part of manifesting that vision. And there's something really communal about independent films because they don't have the budget. So I actually did a great independent feature out here in Newfoundland called Crown and Anchor, and it is a family crime drama without any supernatural elements. But it was written, directed, and starring all Newfoundland actors, musicians, scored to punk rock. And they said, we want to put what little budget we have on the screen. Is it okay if, there's no trailers? There was hair and makeup, but it was like as soon as they were shooting, we'd have to turn the blow dryer off. And, if you wanted to rest, you grab a roll of paper towel and just kind of crash out in the living room. And that's what I love because my favorite part of this business is the people I get to work with. And the more communal and more family like it can feel, the more I love it. And so Thunderbird was like that. Vancouver, where it was shot, was so busy that it was hard to find not only equipment but also crew. So a lot of the crew in this movie had just arrived from like a variety of different countries, and they all wanted to get a little experience working in the Vancouver film industry. And it's like, you've been a third AD, great, you're second D, and you've got some experience on set, great. Now you're going to be a key of this department, and not to take away from the expertise. It just wasn't necessarily a lot of experience. It was a very young crew. And I love that because everyone was just doing their best, learning on the fly. When it came to some stunts, I learned what a hot swap was when there's no time to go back to like a dressing room. And there's no time or no budget for double outfits. So you just do the scene. The stunt person usually goes first. And then when it's all, hot and sweaty, you throw it on and you pick up where she left off.
That
And
is
it's,
that's
yeah,
fascinating. That is
it's
absolutely
stuff like that
fascinating.
I love. It's like everyone throw their hats in the ring and let's do whatever it takes to tell the story. And I like that sense of community that I find in independent projects.
Now, talking about new people, your main co-star, Colton Wilk, this is his first professional acting credit.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like working with Colton? You being very an experienced actor, coming up against somebody doing his first professional acting gig. Did he come to you for advice? Did you offer advice? What'd you think of him? How did you guys mesh?
Well, like I was first approached by Michael Morrison, the producer, and Nicholas, and for me it always starts with the writing. I know this is one of the questions you had sent me about, like what's some of the best advice you've gotten, and if I could kind of sneak in this like tasty little caveat. One of my favorite bits of advice professionally was from David Bradley, Satrakian and the Strain,
Yes. And
and I
also
mean
Walder Frey and also
Walter
the
Frey in Game of
Gryffindor.
Thrones,
Oh
Harry Potter.
God, the guy is awesome.
His resume is so illustrious, and he couldn't be more down to earth. He's just. I want to be David Bradley when I grow up. I still won't be anywhere near as cool because he's one of the coolest men with the best stories. But some people were talking about negative experiences on set, or if you've ever worked with someone who was kind of difficult. And he's had the longest career, and he's had zero negative experiences. I'm like, wow, how can that be? Like, in all the things you've worked in over the years in so many countries, you've never worked with anyone that was a bit, difficult or not had a good experience. And he said, I follow the writing. I
Wow.
always follow the writing, and it never disappoints because you always end up working with people that are there for the same reasons.
Wow.
And for varying budgets, of course, but if you do things just for like the paycheck, you might have some people that aren't necessarily um
Into
you
the
know
project as much
yeah,
as yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And so back to your question, I just love Nicholas's writing. And if the writing is good and the story is intriguing, even if I don't understand it all, I want to be part of that journey. But I said, I have one question. Your lead actor is ungoogleable. And I've never met any person, regardless of industry, that is somehow not on the internet, Facebook, something. And when I met Colton, it's because he spent a lot of time out at sea on a fishing boat called Ocean Twilight.
Just yeah,
And
just like the
there's this,
movie.
just like the movie, and there's this great story about, he was diving off the coast of Alaska. He was, I think, leading some dive expeditions, and there were some people that saw that he was screenwriting, working on writing his first script, and wanted to get involved, and they launched Ocean Twilight Pictures. This is at least how I remember the story, and brought Nicholas on to sort of, tweak the script and make it his own and direct it. And he'd been sort of having the story in his mind for a long time. He'd been working on it for a while, so had Nicholas. So even though it might have been his first professional acting experience, he'd gone to acting school. He was studying out in Victoria, and was really keen on being a part of like movie making. He wanted to write, he wanted to act, and again, it's just that energy of people that are just really eager
And
to
you
do a great
guys
job. And
and you guys meshed so well. Your character and his character meshed so well, like a big sister little brother type of relationship.
exactly, and I think that's, it's a really nice relationship to play where, we were unlikely allies.
Yeah.
But
After
there
you
was an
knocked him on his ass in the first scene, but yeah.
of course, let it be clear who's boss. I don't want to make the same mistakes again.
Exactly.
But he's got his ear to the ground, and he's got access to things and people that the police just don't. And I think that's kind of key sometimes to solving these crimes, is not just trying to do something through a system. You need to play by certain rules and protocols, of course, but you have to think in some unorthodox ways. And he had that access, and also having lost his parents and now losing his sister, I was a surrogate sister, mom, parent um, person, I think, to him. So yeah, I really thought the relationship with the movie was unique. Not something you see on screen a lot.
Now, how about the Native Americans, First Americans, the indigenous people? Were they brought on from outside, or were they locals that were
Oh,
actors and willing to do the movie?
100% local. Like they had already brought the story to the Coast Salish people and didn't want to do it without their input, without their consulting, without their blessing, without their involvement. Um, so we had, elders, hereditary chiefs, Latash, his daughter, his family that were part of the Coquito tribe up just north of Vancouver. We had these incredible, legendary mask makers. David Knox, I think his great grandfather, Mungo Knox, was like a famous mask maker for the Queen. And they, brought Will and people from the movie in to make the masks together, and invited them into their big house to see their ceremonial dances. And so it was just a beautiful blessing to be able to tell that story together with them. I didn't have a lot of involvement with those scenes, unfortunately. I wish I was
Hmm.
there for that, but just knowing that they were, an important part of the process, and carefully including this, their legends and folklore, and yeah, I don't think they would have wanted to do it any other way.
Yeah, it was beautifully done. Now, let's go on to what was, to date, your longest running stint on a TV show. And that is where I really became a big fan of yours, and that is The Strain. Now, when The Strain started on FX, I saw the promos. I'm like, this looks interesting. Let me give it a shot. I ended up watching every episode as it happened. I didn't binge watch it after it was done. I was watching it live as it went on. You play Kelly Goodweather, uh,
Yes.
who is Ephraim, the character Ephraim's wife, and you turn very quickly in the series, and I thought you were pretty much one and done, but you ended up being throughout the whole 4 seasons of the
Best
show.
worst thing to ever happen to me. Or
That
best worst, the best worst thing to happen to Kelly.
exactly, exactly. Because I don't know if you did not switch if they would have just ended up sacrificing you. So getting turned into, I guess, a vampire,
Mhm.
for lack of a better term, was the best thing that could have happened to your character. Now, when you got, first of all, did you have to audition for that character?
I did. I had sent in an audition tape, not knowing a lot about the graphic novels. I hadn't read the books yet. Um, but I had a callback, and it was with Guillermo del Toro and Carlton Cuse. And before I even had a chance to really get in my head and get really nervous, because I love Pan's Labyrinth, and even though I didn't watch Lost, I was very well aware of Carlton's pedigree. But they couldn't have been warmer, more inviting and inclusive. And Guillermo is like a big hugger. They're just wonderful, wonderful, creative, brilliant men. And they said, "Well, are you comfortable in makeup?" Um, and knowing that this is where the character's going, I have a bit of a dance background, so they, I think, were, hopeful that I would be able to take on the physicality, because there wasn't a lot of dialogue in the second season. And yeah, I ended up with a screen test with Corey. I was pretty nervous, but they even said, "We could tell you were nervous, but your audition was so good." And when I got to the first table read, I think I turned 40 that year, and we were on a big trip with a bunch of friends. And I found out when I was very far away that I had to hurry up and come back because I got the part. And I showed up at the first table read, and Corey looks at me. He's like, "You look really surprised."
Now, when you found
Yeah,
out the cast, Corey Stoll, David Bradley, I mean, Kevin Durand, and on,
yeah.
it's the cast. It really was the cast that brought that story to life. Uh, when you guys were filming and you were done with the first season, was there questions that this might be it, this may not go for a second season? And at the end of the day, it the whole arc, and you guys got to start and finish the story the way it was meant to be told, and that must be so rewarding.
It really is, because we know in this business there's no guarantees. Even
Mm-mm.
like shows that are doing really well are inexplicably canceled overnight with no satisfaction of wrapping up a storyline. There was a lot of hope and momentum, just knowing that there was this trilogy of very successful books co-written by Guillermo, and Chuck Hogan, and knowing that there was a lot of great trust with FX. They're, as we know, like an edgier, riskier network that
Yeah.
want to give their creators autonomy. And there was the hope that they would have 4 to 5 seasons to be able to tell the story from, the source material of 3 books. And, they were able to still make it its own thing, not completely married to the books, obviously, or I would have been dead a lot sooner. um, Not necessarily dead, but a lot deader than what I was able to play.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, now in retrospect, we're, just more fortunate as time goes on to like you said, to be able to do 4 complete seasons.
And that show had a big following, a big cult following, and I think that's definitely what propelled it. How, like I said, you were, for the majority of your time on that show, you were in makeup. You were a vampire. How long did you have to spend every day sitting in that makeup chair getting all done up?
I was one of the more high maintenance vamps. I was 4.5 hours in the makeup chair. Um, I think Quinlan was a close second,
Yeah.
but yeah, 4.5 hours. I didn't necessarily have to do that every day. I would often only have to, I'd have a few scenes in not every episode, half the episodes. And so I would normally work 2 to 3 days a week, which was about all my skin could actually handle. I think Rupert one time after working 3 days straight was like, dermatologically speaking, we need to break it up. And I still loved it though. The makeup is they're such geniuses, the makeup artists that worked on this. Colin Penman and Yantha Goldberg and Steve Newbern, who created the look of the vamps for Guillermo, and he's worked with them on, Crimson Peak and Pacific Rim. Sorry, I'm moving around a little bit.
No, that's fine.
um, and it made it so easy to get into character. I mean, and I talk a lot, so I would normally talk through the whole makeup process. And I take one look in the mirror and be like, okay, well there she is. And then the feelers that came in to play in the third season, I mean, they did all the dirty work. My God, they were such talented little acrobats and dancers that I really just had to like hit my mark and, say a few things from Kelly's limited emotional palette. And they, gave me a little more leverage. I remember Carlton saying, the palette's added a couple of more shades, but it's still sort of limited and singular in your intention. You want to exact, but you can't. But
Exactly.
you've got access to some of your old personality. And so I think season three, I was able to go back to looking like Kelly, which was a nice break, but actually more challenging to do without the makeup I found.
Yeah, yeah, that's when they actually, well, the master did that on purpose to get at, Corey's character and get to your son and get
Hmm.
inside and use you as bait. That's reason why he kept you alive. You were very useful to
Yeah.
him. So yeah, in the latter seasons, they did dress you up less in the makeup where you have lost your hair and, you were just totally vampire-ish and started to look more like your old self to lure your son away and you did succeed. You
And I
did.
was dressed by Eichhorst, so it was like soccer mom in the bunny shirt, the
I
old fashioned German.
oh man, Icors, talk about an evil character, but so brilliantly played.
So good. The brilliant Richard Samuel. I was so excited to be able to get to work with him almost exclusively. I mean, of course, there was, so many times when I was like, God, I wish I could be part of the Get Along Gang, the Motley Crew with like, I mean, Satrakian and Fett and Dutch. I never actually had any scenes with them, and yet we all got along so well. I said, they're my favorite actors I've never worked with.
That's true. There's not
Yeah.
any scenes with you guys. It's kind
Yeah.
of hard to realize that, but there really isn't. Do you
Mm-mm.
like how the strain wrapped up? I do. I like how they wrapped up the story.
Good. Why did you like it?
I liked it because it might be, a typical trope. The good triumphs over evil. The nuclear
Hmm.
weapon goes off. They do get rid of the master. And of course, this was not where, as opposed to like a zombie virus where you have to kill each and every zombie. Here, if you took out the master, they're all useless. All
It's
the
like taking out the queen bee.
Exactly. Once you take
Yeah.
out the queen bee, the others are just worthless. They don't know what to do. He was commanding them the whole time. And the way
Mm.
it went out with the nuclear explosion underground in Manhattan and the way it was wrapped up, I think it gave the whole story good closure. Uh, quick question. Where did you guys shoot the strain?
Toronto, my
Toronto.
hometown.
Okay. Okay. They did
Yeah.
they did a pretty good job. You didn't do any exterior shots in New York City?
I think there was just a small handful where I chorused, had some scenes with the Statue of Liberty. And so I do know that Richard, I think, had to go to New York for a few, but maybe once or twice throughout the whole scene. Like Toronto was very adept
Oh yeah.
at becoming a lot of different cities. And Guillermo lives there part time, at least. He loves the cruise in Toronto. He's made most of his films there. Um, he's got Nightmare Alley coming out that he just wrapped shooting, and like Crimson Peak, Pacific Rim. Yeah, he loves Toronto.
Okay. All right. We have a lot. You've been so much. We have a lot of projects to cover. Let's move on to your two episodes on Clarice. Okay. Luann Felker. You were in a coma. You were in a bed. You were the twin sister to the very evil Marilyn Felker. But what was it like being on the set with Rebecca Breeds, Michael Cudlitz, and
Who
that
was a guest of
amazing
yours?
cast?
I saw that you
Yes,
had Michael on
yes.
the
Michael
show.
Cudlitz is, yeah, he was a guest of mine. He was one of my first ever guests, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. Michael is
Such a great guy. Such
awesome.
a like wonderful actor with like a beautiful commanding presence, but like so genuine. Even when he arrested me, I didn't mind.
And when I saw him, like playing Paul Krendler on Clarice, from knowing him all those years, I've known Michael since he was Shannon Doherty's date in 90210 is prom. Okay? That's how long I've known Michael. And I actually teased him about that in the interview that I did with him. I'm like, you were Shannon Doherty's date in 90210. Uh,
Can't
but
get nothing by you.
he just going from like a character on The Walking Dead like Abraham to Paul Krendler just shows the acting chops that
Yep.
Michael Cudlitz has.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh,
Indeed.
he
And
it,
Rebecca Breeds as well. I mean, you close your eyes and you think you're in a room with Clarice Starling.
exactly,
And she
exactly.
really made it her own. I mean, she has a very musical ear, a complete knack for the Virginian accent. Is just a wonderkind and so just sweet. I mean, you never know we were filming such dark material because in between scenes, she was, even as I tortured her and stabbed her with needle after needle after needle, we'd have this great time between every take. Also, we were filming through the pandemic, which was really uniquely challenging. We were very lucky that the film industry was allowed to continue by, testing 3 to 4 times a week and very, very careful on set where all the crew were double masked with goggles. The actors were tested, like I said, multiple times, but you couldn't really move around on set. It was just the actors had to stay in one room. And Demaine Davis, who was one of the producers, was wonderful. And Chloe Dumont, who directed us from another room with goggles and a mask and yet still able to, convey our intentions and tell a great story. And it was a tall order for me. Marilyn was not an easy character, but I had a ton of fun.
Yeah, you could tell Marilyn was not a bad person.
She was tortured.
She was trapped between a rock and a hard place. She loved her
Yeah.
sister. She would have done anything she could for her sister.
Yeah.
And she had these bad group of people who now we know who they are. And there was that moment where Clarice did reach you, but something snapped. She said something wrong, and when you were cornered at the end, you just took yourself out. Because why do you think, in your opinion, Marilyn killed herself? Why would you say? I mean, she obviously had no way out. She was going to go into custody if she did not do it.
Hmm.
Was it because she feared the consequences from the bad people worse than what the FBI was going to give her?
I think that's definitely a factor. Um, it was yeah, a rock and a hard place is very well said. But also, she had a very lonely, miserable, sad, difficult existence. And
Exactly.
if she couldn't have this one version of some kind of normalcy and making things up with her sister and being able to provide for both her and herself and sort of relive the childhood that she was robbed of, have the relationship she was robbed of with her sister. And if that wasn't part of, the equation, then I just think, yeah, she didn't really have a choice.
Exactly. Now, Clarice was also shot in Toronto.
Do you want a
So
fun fact?
what?
It was my all my scenes in Clarice take place in that one room
Hmm.
in Luann's long-term care facility.
Yeah.
And I do remember being somewhat nervous with the pilot of The Strain. It was a really big deal, and we shot in this old haunted house right next to the Keg Mansion, which is also haunted in Toronto, on Guillermo's 50th birthday.
Wow.
And the scenes in the psychiatrist's office were in this house, and I just was trying to, like, keep my cool and stay present. But again, was like very nervous. And I remember that they started covering Corey first, and then the therapist first, and then all kinds of like other parts of the scene. And then we broke for lunch, and that was Guillermo's birthday. And then my scene was going to be at the very, very end. And everyone from the production office came for Guillermo's birthday. A mariachi band was waiting in the wings. I could see them in their outfits and, with their accordions waiting to play, and everyone waiting for the monitor, waiting for my takes to be done so they could sing happy birthday. And as soon as Guillermo said, I like that one, I'm like, great, we're good. And so, all these years later, this is another really sort of, tall order, difficult role to play. And I'm just trying to, be a little calmer than I've been in the past with taking on, new challenges and dropping out in your first day on a big set, and I'm rolling up to the set of Clarice, and I see the Keg Mansion, and I look, and I'm walking into the exact same building and the exact same room that we shot the pilot for The Strain in. All my scenes from the pilot and The Strain were the scenes of Luann and
Wow,
Marilyn for my episode.
that is a great fact right there. How do you feel about
Yeah,
Toronto? Your hometown is basically the Los Angeles of Canada now. I mean, it used to be
Hollywood North.
Vancouver. It
Yeah.
was Vancouver back in the 90s where everything was being shot. Now it's Toronto. I mean, it's like the LA of Canada. I mean, how does that feel?
I think it's really great. I think it's really fortunate because I used to, go to LA every pilot season and have to go down for meetings, and you really felt like you had to be there. But and I would go, but then I would often get booked and come back to Toronto where I live. It's my home. I've got family there, friends, my partner. And so I would sometimes feel kind of guilty where all the people from the strain were from, Germany, France, England, the States. And it was hard for them to be away from their families. And I, got to sleep in my own bed and be close to everyone. And I just felt really lucky in Toronto. Yeah, it's a great city. The crews are fantastic. That's why so much production comes. It's not just the tax credits. That definitely helps attract people to Canada, but it's the quality of the crews. It's incredible. So, the fact that, like I said, Guillermo trusts the crews, the artists, the city, its people, its talent, its actors. It's a
N-
testament to the quality of work
Now,
produced here.
Guillermo is like a legend, and he's still a legend in the making. And
Hmm.
it seems like you have a lot of admiration for him. We hear nothing but great things about Guillermo del Toro and all his great work that he's done. Uh, I mean, what can you tell us about Guillermo del Toro working for him? I mean, you've already said a lot, but uh, what makes him so amazing in your opinion?
I I used to say, wow, he's equal parts like levity and specificity. He's like just a tactician who cares about everything to like the smallest detail. And he writes, he journals, he draws, he storyboards, he animates. He has this beautiful, tireless mind. I know that when we were shooting The Strain, he would he'd shot the pilot in several key scenes, but then he was off shooting Crimson Peak. And I remember going to visit the set of Crimson Peak to say hello on the lunch hour. And that's when he was watching dailies and supervising special effects from The Strain on his lunch hour while shooting Pacific Rim and producing, animation in Japan. And when, the term genius might get tossed around a lot, but I honestly think he deserves it. And he
Yeah.
has this like beautiful boy like quality at the same time. Like there was a scene in The Strain with Eichhorst. It was a very famous scene that involved pineapple and torturing and priming Dutch for
Oh,
something pretty terrible. Nothing was in the book, but Guillermo had a dream, and he showed up on set and said, "I had this dream. How can we make it happen?" And the next day, they were shooting it. They built the set, and it was happening. And and he's also really loyal too. I got a call while they were shooting, like I said, Nightmare Alley is his latest film that just wrapped, starring Kate Blanchett, Bradley Cooper, William Defoe. Um,
wow.
the list goes on and on. And they said, "We got a little something for you. It's not very big, but your scene will be with Kate Blanchett and Bradley. Did you want to do it?" I was doing my taxes. I was like, "Of course." When Guillermo says jump, you say how high. Um, yeah, it's just wonderful to be a part of his world and anything that comes out of his wonderful creative brain and soul.
Uh, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, we read it. I have not had the honor to talk to him yet. I hope to one day.
Well, if
But
Comic Cons come back, I mean, he's the star of Comic Con. You know that he goes a couple of days early and dresses up in costume so he can walk around anonymously, like the fan he is. That's the thing. Like he's such an enthusiast and fan of genres, that he wants to be a part of it. So maybe, when that happens again, you might bump into him at a con.
well, New York Comic Con is happening this October, so you never
It is.
know. Now, you were
Yeah.
also had a small role, but you were in the remake of Dawn of the Dead. You played a CDC reporter, I believe. It was a small role, but
One line.
But what was it like going into a reboot, the best reboot out of the three original iconic films? Dawn of the Dead 2004 was the best reboot of all of them. What was it like going back, just being, even as small as it was, being a part of such a iconic horror franchise?
I mean, it's pretty cool. Like, I didn't know Zack Snyder then, like I knew him now, but the energy on set was definitely electric. And, I know how loyal fans are of the franchise.
Yes.
One of my best friends was in a George C. Romero film, and I went as her date, her plus one, when it opened at Midnight Madness at the Toronto Film Festival. And it's just, I feel like the fans of the zombie genre are so great. So I did have one line in that movie,
Yeah, I
and
know.
in the movie, I think you only see the back of my head, but my one line was actually used in the trailer. So I remember hearing it on the radio and hearing it, zombies, are they alive or are they dead? Which is a real question.
It is. It
I mean, they're
is.
very present and you got to deal with them. So
Uh,
if you're going to have one line, it was a cool one to have.
so what was that? You said you didn't. That's when you were first getting to know Zack Snyder as a director. He is such a non-genre specific director. He does everything.
Yeah.
What was it like meeting Zack Snyder back in 2003, 2004?
To be honest, I don't think I did. Like, I feel like I was at the very back of that, CDC conference, and he was at the very front, and I was, one of hundreds of actors that day. I didn't. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but
No.
I don't have any good Zach stories for you.
Okay, now another iconic franchise, Saw. All right, you were in Saw 5. Uh,
Kinda,
kind
but
of.
not. This is another disappointing story, and it's funny because those two titles are what pop up first on IMDb.
Yeah.
But I had one scene in Saw,
Yes.
and I I have a hard time watching horror. So I'd seen the first one, and it was a lot for me. But I did know from the creators and writers that you might have one small part in one, and you become the lead of the next or the one later. Like Lyric Bent had a small role, I think, in two, but then was the lead in three.
Yeah.
And so they said, "You're a nurse, and you've got one scene, but we've got plans down the road. Would you be willing to do it?" And I think I was actually up for the lead, which ended up going to
What, Saw
Yvonne
5 or Saw
Straczynski.
6?
Five.
5. Okay.
So I did the one scene and they cut it. I'm not even in the movie. I'm in the credits only.
That
That's it.
sucks. That sucks.
Yeah.
Well,
So yeah, very disappointing for people that love the franchise.
now you said you're not a big horror fan. Now, would you consider Strain horror? I do. Do you consider it horror?
To me, it was yeah, I mean, it's certainly not sci-fi, but to me, it was so fantastical that it doesn't feel like horror to me. Like, I'm far more disturbed by things that deal with really evil people,
Mm-hmm.
because that's something that's a really real fear, or evil spirits, which I also believe in. Um, Whereas I remember asking Guillermo on his birthday while we were shooting the pilot, and he was sitting in the Kig Mansion that's like famously haunted in Toronto. And I said, "So, you believe in ghosts?" He's like, "Well, absolutely. I can't wait." And I think he was going to do a ghost tour in New Orleans right after we wrapped. I said, "Okay, but what about vampires?" There's folklore for millennia of
Mm-hmm.
different cultures and disparate countries that all have folklore around vampires. Is there any truth to it? He said, "Ghosts, yes. Vampires, no." so, um, for me, yes, I found maybe some people might have found it graphic and sort of scary in a graphic way. But to me, the story was more fantasy, like fantastical. So it's something that I could watch no problem
Yeah.
and loved it.
And Guillermo, like I said, we talked about, he's done so many different things, but he did carve he does have a niche in the horror industry.
Oh, yes.
He's very well known in the horror industry. Looking at, you brought up IMDb, and looking at your IMDb credits, you have been very busy during and sort of now as we're hopefully coming to the end of this COVID thing. You have been very active, very busy. Uh, what do you attribute that to? Whereas, you've been in a bunch of stuff that came out last year in 2019, in 2021. You were in Clarice. You have another movie that's in post production, The Breach. What,
Oh, you're gonna love that. The
what?
Breach is directed by Rodrigo Godino, who is the editor in chief of Rue Morgue magazine,
Oh,
and which I wouldn't know. I certainly am not reading a lot of horror literature and didn't know, but Guillermo was a fan of Rue Morgue magazine, and he knew of and liked the first female editor of Rue Morgue magazine is Jovanka Vukovic,
okay.
and he executive produced her first short film.
Ooh,
I believe it was called The Bird or Little Bird or something. And then she approached me to be an XX, which was going to be the first all female horror anthology, which ended up premiering at Sundance. And it was like four vignettes with four, they were all written, directed, produced, and starring women, which was incredible because, she said it's typically a male dominant genre and she's set out to change that.
yes.
And so it was because, Guillermo's support with her first film, and she, I think, liked me from the strain, so that I got to be a part of that, which was pretty incredible. And she gave me books on the psychology of horror. She's written books on the genre, and so the fact that I keep getting these opportunities to work in it, I think there's a lot to be gained from not from facing your fears, which is actually a theme of the movie Thunderbird. It's about facing what scares
Your
you. And
demons.
so your demons, facing your demons. I was like plagued by a recurring nightmare when I was young, and I still have nightmares to this day, which is why I don't get a thrill from watching horror. I spend most of my time trying to avoid it. But The Breach is directed by Rodrigo, who's a good friend of Guillermo's, and like I said, comes from his magazine that has a lot of fans. And working with him, it's like The Breach is a psychological horror, kind of a quantum, a horror that sort of takes place in the quantum realm. Fascinating script. I shot it in the pandemic with Alan Hocko as the lead. And the way we were able to make that work, I didn't work a ton in the pandemic. The whole industry shut down worldwide for 6 months. But this was one of the first things where they found an abandoned Super 8 motel, and everyone tested prior to that,
Mm-hmm.
um, isolated a little bit, and then got to the Super 8, and we stayed there, shot there, slept there, partied. They even kept the bar open for us. And it was really cool because I hadn't been able to do that with friends or family for like a year. And suddenly we were able to do that while making this really cool film. So I feel really grateful that, they've allowed films to take the right precautions, but still be able to continue as an essential service because we all know how essential
Yeah.
content is when we're stuck at home.
Exactly, exactly. And you brought up XX, and that was going to be my next line of questions.
Okay.
How did you initially get involved in the XX series?
Yeah, I mean, not to repeat myself, but it was Yovanka liking the strain, reaching out with this project. And it was based on a Jack Ketchum short story, who's one of her favorite writers. And The Box, which is the opening segment that was adapted and directed by Ivanka, again, this is something that asks more questions
Exactly that.
than it
That
does give you any answers, and I love that about it.
yeah, the mysterious red box that stops, everyone from eating in the box. I mean, and that is just wow. It's just such a powerful, powerful moment. Now, you already mentioned you're not a horror fan, and you'd be surprised. You are not alone. I have spoken to so many actors who have appeared in so many horror, but they just
Mhm.
cannot watch it. So, is it safe to assume, like movies like Dawn of the Dead and Saw 5, where you've had small scenes or your scenes have been cut out, is it safe to assume you've never watched those movies?
Yes.
You're
That
not
would be
alone.
safe.
You're
I'm
not
not
alone.
alone. Okay,
No,
good.
you're not alone. And I have spoken to a lot of people who are afraid of horror, and it's perfectly normal and okay. But a lot of them say doing it and seeing how it's done behind the scenes, and seeing whether it's a paranormal film with a ghost or a slasher, where where you go have lunch with the slasher in between takes, sort of takes the scare out of it from seeing the final product. But I
Yeah.
totally understand it. Now, besides your movie, The Breach, which is when is that coming out? Do you think?
I'm not sure. I know that Slash came on as like a producing partner who's going to score the film, which is pretty rad. Um, and I'm not, we really don't know. I mean, Thunderbird we made in 2017 and it premiered at the Whistler Film Festival in 2019, right before the pandemic. And now it's just coming out now. So you never know sometimes how long it takes to
Okay.
get things
Okay. Now, another role.
out.
This is again going back way back now, 2003. You did have another small role in How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
Yeah,
Okay.
not a
With
horror. And I've seen that movie many times.
yeah, no,
That,
Matthew McConaughey, Kate Hudson. Uh, One of my favorite movies. I love it. What was that like back in like God? That's 18 years ago now.
oh God. Um,
Yeah.
Yuck. That was like the first Hollywood set I've ever been on. I had one line. There again, I had more screen time in the credits than I did in the actual movie. But it's when I realized I just needed a lot more experience. Like I just wanted to work on, any kind of set to gain experience because I didn't have a lot at the time. And I remember, this was back when you could smoke inside. So Kate Hudson was smoking inside, and Matthew McConaughey had these like kind of vocal warm ups he would do before a scene. And those vocal warm ups that he does ended up in The Wolf of Wall Street. I remember seeing that film and him and Leo in this scene, and he's kind of doing this thing, beating his chest, and then gets Leo to start doing it. I thought, I wonder if that was just kind of improvised and they shot it, but then it became this huge scene at the end where the whole office is sort of doing this like,
Yeah. Yeah.
vocal thing. But apparently no, it was like that's what McConaughey likes to do before a take, and it sort of caught on and they incorporated it into the story, which I thought was pretty cool. But I remember being told to stand in a certain place
Yes.
and I was just doing what I was told. And then all of a sudden, Kate Hudson comes on, and she's not supposed to know I exist, which is why she's hitting on my husband.
Yes.
And she said, "Is there any way that she could not stand in my eye line? Like I can see her, and I'm supposed to not know she exists." I didn't even know what an eye line was, and I was before I could even say, "But someone told me to stand here." It's just like suck it up and move.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the show's got to go on. So that was a really good lesson to really pay attention and every experience is a good experience, whether it's one line or no lines. It all
Exactly,
helps.
exactly. Everything is a learning experience. Now, take
Yeah.
us back. How did you get into acting? Did you know from a young age this is what you wanted to do? Did you get your start in theater? A lot of actors get their start in theater, move on to TV and films. How did it work out for you?
I think a lot of the good ones do start in theater. I sort of came about it sort of, I don't know, I'd say from the sidelines, but I did a couple of plays in high school. I like being on stage from dance. I studied dance in Timmins, Ontario, and did a couple of high school plays, but um, I had friends in the drama club. I wasn't even in the drama club. I was sort of an art nerd. And when I went to university, I was studying fine arts and I would take a theater class, but I knew people that were in the theater program. And I got my first professional job, I guess, was a Heinz ketchup commercial that ran for like 20 years. So I was working a lot in commercials, but because I knew how dedicated the actors I knew were, I never considered myself an actor, even though I was part of this acting union for a long time. I had side gigs, I was throwing parties, I had an events company. And when that dissolved, I thought, you know what? I really want to put my eggs in one basket and give this thing all my attention and focus. And I think I landed some really strange small role on this MTV series. And I started coaching. I started taking classes, taking workshops. And like to this day, I still work with one of my coaches 20 years later. So, it started with one line and then one scene. And then suddenly I had my first lead in a vampire movie with David Carradine called The Last Sect.
Yeah.
It was a loose homage to The Hunger.
Yes.
I was like the Susan Sarandon character being seduced by
Great
Catherine
movie, The
Deneuve.
Hunger. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
So yeah, still learning.
you know, I forgot my question, but what I was going to ask is, looking back on your career, what would you say was your biggest break? Was it the whole hunger thing, or was it the strain? What was the biggest break that propelled you to where you are now?
Um, Definitely, I landed the lead role in a series called Sophie on
Okay.
CBC in Canada. Got picked up by ABC Family for a short time in the States, and I played Sophie. And it was obviously my first lead role in a series. I was the titular character, and I was freaking out the first season because I had the most to do with the least experience. But again, I just leaned on these illustrious actors, Mimi Kuzik and Sarah Botsford, Jeff Geddes, Amy Lalonde, who we sort of came into the business at the same time. She had been teaching drama, and then suddenly we were working in the film and TV industry, and we just soaked it all up and paid attention and tried to do it with some grace. And then we got a second season. We did 32 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And in Canada, after you have a lead in a series, though, I went back to doing like small short films. Like, again, just anything to garner experience. And then the strain by
Yes.
far was the bigger break outside of Canada, of course.
Yeah.
Being able to go to Comic Cons and just be in the shadow of Guillermo was like such a thrill and a blessing, and it's definitely opened doors in the horror realm. Can't escape it. It keeps coming for me.
What advice would you give young actors coming into this industry like we just went through a whole interview where you mentioned you had one-liners in big movies, but they were
Mm-hmm.
one-liners, but they were big movies. Your name is permanently attached to that movie. One line, whether it's cut out or not, it is. What advice would you give to young actors, actresses coming up in this business to, if they do get that one line role, and some of them say, well, no, I'm doing this for something bigger. I mean, to me, that would be ridiculous. I would say you start out taking the job, get your name out there, right?
100%. I feel like any experience you can gain, if there's people that say, well, what if I don't know, if I just want to do commercials, I'm like, doesn't matter, study.
Yeah.
Whatever you can do, whatever classes you can take, or whatever theater productions you can be a part of. Or nowadays, I tell kids, when they ask me for advice, even if it's for voiceover work, I say if there's any commercials you like, or if there's cartoons that you like, or video games that you love to voice over, record yourself and like just practice and practice doing. Like you learn so much by doing.
Exactly.
You can read books, but ultimately it's about experience on set. And when you do get that opportunity, be as present as possible. I
Soak
have a great
everything in.
soak it up.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
a great secondhand story. It's not mine, but I did a couple of episodes in season 5 of The Expanse.
Yes.
And Wes Chatham had just come from having a part in Tenet and working with Christopher Nolan. And he said there were no cell phones on set and no chairs. Everyone was a part of everyone else's scene, even if you were in the scene. And no one was given a script. You were just given your scene the night before. And I thought, oh, wow. And he said, he thought that would have made him really nervous, but it just made you really present. And everyone was a part of the filmmaking experience.
That
Wasn't waiting in a
is
trailer for
that's so
hours
cool.
on social media and then suddenly trying to like get into the story. Everybody was a part of it. I thought that was so cool.
Now, Christopher Nolan, I don't think I've seen one bad Christopher Nolan movie.
Mm.
Everything he does is great. I wonder if that whole chair thing is just his thing where he does it for everybody, just to keep everybody involved in the
Totally.
movie. Whether it's your scene or not, you are all involved in this movie. And I think it's a great idea, actually. It might
I
get
think
a,
so.
it might get a little tiring, but I think it's a good idea.
I mean, a chair's okay, but no cell phones. Yeah.
Natalie, the time is up. This has been a fascinating hour. Thank you so much for spending this
Thank
with us.
you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a thrill to be able to talk about these, projects that I've just been so fortunate to be part of. And it's awesome that they resonate with people. And I mean, yeah, I could talk to you for another hour.
You've had an awesome career. You really have. You've had a
Thank
great
you.
career, and you are going stronger than ever. And I'm looking forward to seeing more stuff from you. I'm looking forward to seeing The Breach and whatever movie you're filming. You're not filming The Breach now in Newfoundland, right?
I'm filming a show called Hudson and Rex.
Hudson and Rex. Okay.
It's a detective show with the most beautiful dog. And just so you know, Thunderbird, yes, is available now, Vimeo in Canada, but Amazon Prime in the
Exactly.
States and the UK. And thank you for reminding me, because sometimes, it is a tough business where you don't work for, there are droughts, but, you got to stay busy and keep the faith and like,
You've been very,
chatting with people like you and staying enthusiastic about, the work and the industry and, whatever drives you and, keeps your creative juices flowing.
absolutely. Yes, guys. Thunderbird is available on Amazon Prime only. So go out there, check it out. It's a great movie. It's not full of your typical tropes that you see in any kind of criminal, suspense, sci-fi movie. It will throw you for a loop. Natalie's amazing in it. Some great performances in it. Support the independent film industry by watching this film. Natalie, any final thoughts you want to share?
Oh, wow. Yeah, stay connected with each other. This was wonderful just being able to talk to you. It's been such a hard year and so difficult for so many
Yes,
people. And I think it's important to stay connected whatever way we can.
absolutely.
Watch the things that excite you, share it with friends, and just, stay safe and stay connected.
Stay safe. That's the main thing. Stay safe. Stay walking, guys. Till next time, on behalf of Natalie and myself, again, stay walking. Have a great day. Bye bye.
Thanks. Thanks, John. Bye.